So awesome courses, we love it, but when we were 20, 30, 50 people, we thought, man, this is going great. All of a sudden we started getting to 75, 100 people. Oh my gosh, things are breaking down. Like we can't talk to each other the same way we used to. How do we actually sustain this growth? What is the role of product in doing all this? So we were asking ourselves all these questions. So over the last couple of years, really, we started thinking really intentionally over how do we align the company and what role does product have in making sure that that alignment takes place so that we all know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we can essentially all work as one. So, and by the way, I just want to also be totally transparent. We haven't perfected this by any means. It's something that is a continuous work in process. We didn't invent it. We stole great ideas from people like Kirk and Jim Collins and have continuously been adopting it. But we've felt that these were the things that resonated most with us. And so we started really putting them into practice. And we're continuing to do that, continuing to perfect them. So the two approaches that we've been using are one called pillars. And the second approach is something that we call flywheel. And both of these things work in tandem. We didn't realize they were working in tandem until we actually put them in front of us and realized, oh my gosh, these things are all related. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those. So first of all, what are pillars? So I'm not going to read that for you. You guys can read this. But think about it this way. If you're sitting outside your company and you were an external actor looking at the company and going, what are the things that this company continuously does that makes them successful in the market? What are those things? So let me give you an example of that. So this is going to be a question for the audience. Every time I've asked this, people nail it the first time, so don't fail me here. All right, so an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you pillars for a company, and then you're going to read them, and you're going to be able to tell me what company this is just by looking at the pillars. All right? Exactly, Amazon. So Amazon, and by the way, don't quote me on this. I don't know that these are exactly their pillars. I didn't ask Jeff Bezos if these were actually the pillars. But if you look at everything they do, and actually Michael probably knows a lot about this because, but don't correct me. This is the sort of thing that if you were like at the highest levels of the organization, you were thinking, what are the things that we have to do all the time in order to succeed in everything we do? This is what would be an example of the sorts of pillars that you would establish. So before we move on to ACEABLE'S pillars, we're going to have some audience interaction here. So I'm going to give you, I don't know, 30 seconds or so to think about it. And then I need a volunteer to tell me what company you work for and what are your pillars. Okay? I'll give you 30 seconds. I'm going to do some awkward walking around the stage while I do that. And then I'm going to need a mic at some point. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. All right, that's about, maybe not 30 seconds, but you probably already got the gist. All right, any volunteers? We got a volunteer right here.
I'm agency, so it's a little off. Probably sorry. Hello. I have agencies, so it might be a little different than product companies. I would say creative digital solutions. I forgot the other one. Now that I have my creative digital solutions. Scalable technical expertise.
Okay. Well, you know better. I don't know. You know. So.
I have put pillars together.
Well, I mean, and this kind of illustrates kind of the point that this might seem completely obvious when you look at it, but when you're actually trying to think about it for yourself, it may not be that intuitively obvious. So any other volunteers? All right.
I won't use my current company. This is, so I'm going to say what they are and then tell you the company. It's a telco company and it is Challenger, Fun, and sorry, what were Challenger, Fun, and People First. Anybody guess? Yes.
Which I couldn't hear the company. Which company? Oh, okay, all right. That actually makes sense. When you were saying it at first, I was thinking, wait a minute, telecom company, people first. Is this like your internal rallying cry? But now that you mentioned it, it actually does make sense, right? So when we were thinking about this and we said, okay, what are our pillars? We started brainstorming and it was like this whole conversation about it. But in order for us to really go back, we have to start thinking about what actually has made us successful and remove the noise and really think, what are the actual things that are going to either make us successful, have made us, or will make us successful. So where we landed on that are the following. So ACEABLE'S pillars: one, win or skip page one, and I'll explain these in a minute. Exceed expectations in each market, expand our catalog, and fund our future. So win or skip page one. So we are a transactional product from a consumer standpoint. They wake up one morning and say, I want to get a driver's license, or I need to get a real estate license. And what is the first thing they do? They go search on Google for a place that can give them that. So for us, it is absolutely critical that when someone does that, we are the first company that they find. And the skip part is like, ideally, we don't want them to actually find us on Google because we don't want to necessarily pay Google for that. So how do we build systems that like build up word of mouth, that we have channels that we don't have to pay for so that we don't have to do that, but we have to do, and the reality of the world is that we have to do that. And if we, in today's world, if we weren't winning page one, I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be giving you this talk because we wouldn't have, 1.5 million customers a year and do all that, right? So that is a key enabler, and we got to consistently do that. So everything that we do around marketing, not everything, but a lot of the stuff that we do around marketing is rallied around this particular goal. And as we start doing things around engineering where product management get involved to actually build out the marketing solutions, that's also what our product managers are thinking about. Like, how do we achieve this goal, right? Exceed expectations in each market. When we launched our first product, we had a capability that no one else had in the market, which created a disruption, i.e. we could offer it on mobile, and we had the ability to deliver the state official exam in the actual application, which no one had done before. So it allowed everyone to rally around our application and start downloading it. So as we think of every new market we go into is, what is the disruption that we have to have in place in order to not to be a me too? Because me too's, we don't want to spend 20 years trying to grow a market. We want to go in and capture market fast. So what is that thing that we have to do to be different? That's one thing. And then expanding our catalog. So the way we grow, because we operate in the certification and licensing business, and most of these environments are government regulated by the states, not necessarily the federal government. We have to be able to quickly deploy our product across multiple territories and multiple geographies. That involves creating the product, in many cases modifying the content so that it could be acceptable to the state regulators. So Texas might have a slightly different set of regulations than Oklahoma does for driving, for example. So we need to be able to very quickly, once we land, expand to do that. And in a minute here, you're gonna see how this relates to product, but you're probably already starting to get a sense of how it all relates. And then finally, fund our future. So we, I think every company would like to fund our future. But we made an explicit decision about a year and a half ago that we wanted to be in the business of be able to fund our growth through our own cash. So that's something that we really needed to focus on and making decisions around. So ACEABLE'S pillars. So the second concept is this thing called the flywheel. And it's something that Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great. And the idea behind this is that usually we think of companies, or at least I've usually thought about these as like, oh, this company came out, did one thing amazingly well, and voila, they took over the entire market. When you actually go and when Jim Collins actually went in and studied these companies, there was never just one thing that led them to success. It was a series of actions that compounded themselves internally in the company to the point where if you think of a flywheel, when you're first pushing it, it's super heavy. And you're like pushing and pushing, but the more you push, you can start gathering momentum. And at some point in time, you essentially break free. So his analysis basically said that rather than just focusing on like one thing you need to do is like, what is the series and sequence of things that you need to do to build up speed and that flywheel? So I'm gonna give you an example of that, that he talks about actually in the book. So Some of you may not have been born when this happened, but this was 1989 Tour de France, Greg LeMond. And he was, if not the first American I had ever heard of that won the Tour de France. And he was wearing this little helmet by a company called Giro. I don't know if they actually pronounce it that way. Apologies to the company. But Jim went in and they studied how did Giro go from no one has ever heard of them to now they're like one of the most famous brands in that particular that sport with their products. And the analysis he came up with after talking to them and so forth was the following, and this is the flywheel for that company. Well, they started off by saying, hey, we're going to invent this great helmet, but no one knows who the hell we are. So how are we going to get this marketed? We don't have the money to actually market this. So the insight was, why don't we get Greg LeMond to wear this hat, and when he's riding into Paris, everyone in the world is going to take pictures of him with this hat on, and the next thing you know, we're going to start getting known. Well, so they did that, and what ended up happening is that, so they got elite athletes to use it, so Greg LeMond, and then when the Weekend Warriors, we all have seen him in Austin riding the hills, saw this, they're like, I need that hat, right? I need that helmet. So the Weekend Warriors started wearing it. Next thing you know, you inspire these Weekend Warriors to buy more and more of them. Everyone sees the Weekend Warriors using this, so now mainstream customers want to wear the same thing because they want to aspire to be like the Weekend Warrior. And that then generates brand power. Once you have brand power and recognition, they can set a high price because it's aspirational product. With a high price, they can generate margin. They can plow that back into marketing. They can get the next athlete to wear the product. All of a sudden, they got a flywheel effect going on, and they can actually build out a sustainable company. So this is the sort of thing that the research that was done in many companies, not just this one, but across many companies to determine what were the things that actually got them to be successful. So we thought about this at ACEABLE too and said, okay, what is our flywheel? So we've talked about these pillars. So we had not even heard of the flywheel when we first built out our pillars, and then said, we ran into this flywheel concept and said, well, how does that relate to this flywheel thing? So we started thinking about it and was like, wait, our pillars are actually part of the flywheel process. So it's almost the same concept that looked upon not just as the static set of things that you're going to hang on a wall and talk about, but actually a business strategy that you can actually pull off and execute. So when we started the company, or when Blake started the company, we had one course, which was the Texas driving course for teens, parent-taught driver's ed, but we needed to expand beyond that. So we launched the first course, started expanding, and immediately we started getting 5-star reviews. Why? Because no one wanted to use their computer. Everyone wanted to use their mobile. Kids wanted to have fun. They don't want to be stuck in a boring class. And all of a sudden, I literally am running into teens wearing our t-shirts at high schools and going like, well, there is a thing going on. So we started exceeding everyone's expectations because no one thought this could be a fun experience for them. And so that then allowed us to start generating some market awareness, market traction. We had no money to spend on SEM back then. We did spend on SEM, but we didn't really have money to compete with SEM. But the fact that we were getting this crazy following by exceeding expectations allowed us to start growing our market to the point where we could actually start spending some of that cash to start winning positions on Google. So we took that initial market acceptance and by exceeding the expectations of the customer, and we started plowing that cash into now actually being more upfront about our marketing, start paying a lot more for Google Ads and being competitive with companies that were 10 times our size. So we were starting to do that. As we did that, we started to try to figure out, and by the way, I'm gonna give you a disclaimer here. There are pieces internal to the company that I'm not showing here because they're totally confidential in terms of how we do this sort of stuff. So bear with me, it's gonna sound easy. There's a lot of detail behind all these. But I just wanted to let you know that this is, I'm sensitive that I'm not giving you a full disclosure. If you want to talk to me, I'm happy to talk one-on-one. I just didn't want to do it in a public forum. There are things that we do relative to, particularly on skip page 1, but then also on how do we increase our lifetime value for that customer and reduce CAC. But the idea was If we can get a loyal following, a lot of customers coming in, we can then expand that market aperture and start capturing many more customers. Now we have a sizable customer base from which to build long-term LTV. And in turn, having LTV and having more cash and margin available is then plowed into expanding our catalog even further, creating more, more market acceptance, disrupting the consumer. So that's exactly what we did in real estate. By the way, just a story on the real estate bit. When we first approached the real estate commission in Texas and we told them what we were going to build, they almost kicked us out of the building because they had never seen a company that was going to build a course that was really designed with the user in mind. All their stuff was very highly legal oriented. It was like, no, we're going to have real estate agents are going to walk out laughing out of the course and they're going to have a great time. It took us about a year to get them convinced that this was going to be a process that would work. But again, once it came out, we started getting this amazing feedback from the customers that this is exactly what they've always wanted. So that notion of exceeding expectations is super critical to how we enter markets. Again, and now our plan is to basically repeat the flywheel over and over. At some point in time, we'll decide, all right, now we're done with real estate. Let's go do, I don't know, name your vertical market, HVAC, if you want to become an electrician or you want to become a solar panel installer or whatnot. How do we make that an unbelievable expectation so that people talk about us? We create market demand. We can then expand the market aperture with an SEM or a paid marketing campaign, so on and so forth.